It was Tuesday, September 11, 2001. Just another day. The sun had risen quietly over the east coast of the United States. Birds were chirping. Kids were eating cereal. Workers were rushing to get to their offices. Planes were taking off. Coffee shops were crowded. It was a regular morning. In New York City, people flooded the streets. Yellow taxis moved fast. Skyscrapers touched the sky. Among them stood the proud World Trade Center, two giant towers called the Twin Towers. They were 110 stories tall and full of people from many companies, banks, and offices. For some, this was their first day at work. For others, it was just routine. No one had any idea that history would change forever in just a few minutes. At 8:46 a.m., something strange happened. A plane came into view, flying too low, too fast. People on the ground looked up. It was American Airlines Flight 11. The plane didn't turn. It didn't slow down. It crashed straight into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. There was a loud explosion. Fire burst out. Smoke billowed into the sky. Windows shattered. Papers flew out like confetti. People screamed. In homes, offices, and stores, TVs lit up. News anchors stared in shock. A plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center, they announced. At first, many thought it was an accident. Maybe a small private plane had lost control. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. At 9:03 a.m., while people watched the North Tower burn on live TV, another plane appeared. This one turned sharply. It was United Airlines Flight 175. It flew straight into the South Tower. Another huge explosion. Now, the truth hit hard, this was no accident. America was under attack. Fire spread quickly. Thousands of people were inside. Some tried to escape down dark stairwells. Others were trapped on higher floors. Flames blocked their way. Smoke filled the halls. Outside, New Yorkers stood frozen. Some cried. Some ran. All felt helpless. The city that never sleeps was now full of fear. Fire trucks raced in. Police officers tried to control crowds. Ambulances lined up. First responders rushed toward the towers, not away. Many knew they might not come back. But they didn't hesitate. People inside the towers called their families. Some left voicemails saying, "I love you." Others begged for help. Some were seen waving shirts out the windows, hoping to be rescued. A few, faced with unbearable heat and smoke, jumped. The images were too painful to watch, yet impossible to forget. Just when the nation thought it couldn't get worse, it did. At 9:37 a.m., another plane, American Airlines Flight 77, crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. That's the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. A section of the building exploded in flames. People inside were thrown off their feet. Smoke poured out. Now it was clear, this was a planned, coordinated attack. 3 planes had struck important symbols of America. Its economy and its military. A 4th plane was in the air, United Airlines Flight 93. The hijackers had taken control. But the passengers had heard about the other attacks. They knew what was coming. They made phone calls to their loved ones and said goodbye. Then they made a brave decision. They would not let the hijackers win. With great courage, the passengers stormed the cockpit. There was a struggle. The plane never reached its target. At 10:03 a.m., it crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The passengers saved many lives that day, perhaps even the White House or Capitol building. The South Tower, hit second, was the first to fall. At 9:59 a.m., just 56 minutes after being struck, the entire tower collapsed. It fell straight down, floor by floor, in a huge cloud of dust. The sound was like thunder. People screamed. Cameras shook. Then, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower followed. It too collapsed completely. In just a few hours, two of the tallest buildings in the world were gone. A part of New York's heart had fallen. Downtown was covered in ash. People ran through smoke. Survivors looked like ghosts, covered in dust, eyes wide in shock. The place where the towers once stood became known as Ground Zero. Fires burned for days. Steel beams twisted like paper. Rescue workers dug through the rubble, hoping to find survivors. Some did. Many didn't. Photos of missing people were taped everywhere, on walls, streetlights, and fences. Families waited, prayed, and cried. Firefighters worked until they dropped from exhaustion. Many didn't go home. Some lost their lives trying to save others. Stories of bravery came to light, people who carried strangers down dozens of floors. Workers who refused to leave until everyone was out, and office managers who died trying to help their teams. At the moment of the first crash, President George W. Bush was visiting a school in Florida. A Secret Service agent whispered in his ear. A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. He stayed calm, finished reading with the children, and then left quickly. Later that day, he addressed the nation from the White House. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. His words comforted many, but fear still gripped the country. Planes were grounded. Borders were secured. No one knew what would come next. Across the globe, people stared at their TV screens in disbelief. In cities from London to Delhi, Paris to Tokyo, candles were lit. Flags flew at half-mast. World leaders sent messages of support. Some people in faraway lands cried for America, even if they had never been there. In towns and villages everywhere, churches, mosques, and temples held prayers. The world stood still for a moment, united in pain. The smoke took days to clear. Fires kept burning at Ground Zero. The smell of burning metal and dust filled the air for weeks. Silence fell over New York City. Streets that once echoed with honking horns and voices were now filled with sirens, prayer, and sorrow. Rescue crews worked around the clock. But soon, it became clear, there were few left to rescue. Over 2,900 people had died. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, firefighters, police officers, flight crews, lives from over 90 countries were lost. The question everyone asked was, who attacked us? The U.S. government quickly identified the group behind it. Al-Qaeda, a terrorist network led by a man named Osama bin Laden. They had planned the attacks in secret for years. The hijackers had lived in America for months. They trained at flight schools. They blended in. No one suspected their dark plans. The attack wasn't just sudden, it was carefully designed to cause as much fear, pain, and destruction as possible. On September 20, 2001, President Bush stood before Congress and said, "Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there." Soon after, the United States launched Operation Enduring Freedom, starting a war in Afghanistan. The goal, remove the Taliban, who had protected al-Qaeda, and find Osama bin Laden. Troops were sent. Bombs were dropped. Allies joined in. A long war began, one that would last for years. Airports changed overnight. Security became strict. TSA, Transportation Security Administration, was formed. Shoes were taken off. Bags were scanned. Cockpit doors were locked. People became more cautious, more fearful. Words like terror alert, Patriot Act, and Homeland Security became part of everyday conversation. Mosques and Muslim Americans faced suspicion, even though they had nothing to do with the attacks. Hate crimes rose. Innocent people were hurt. Fear had created division. The real pain of 9/11 was not in buildings. It was in the hearts of people who lost someone. Children waited for parents who never came home. Wives hugged pillows instead of husbands. Parents buried their sons. Friends held empty chairs. Some survivors couldn't sleep. Some couldn't go back to work. Others suffered from PTSD, haunted by what they saw, heard, and smelled. But there was also strength. Families formed support groups. Survivors spoke in schools. Victims' names were etched in memorials. People said, "We will not forget." For nearly 10 years, Osama bin Laden evaded capture. The U.S. searched mountains, deserts, and caves. He became the most wanted man in the world. Finally, on May 2, 2011, U.S. Navy SEALs found him hiding in Pakistan. In a secret nighttime mission, they entered his compound and killed him. President Obama announced. Justice has been done. Crowds gathered outside the White House, singing the national anthem. It brought closure to some, but pain still remained. Among the tragedy, heroes shone bright. Firefighter Stephen Siller, off-duty, ran through a tunnel to reach the Twin Towers, and never came out. Rick Rescorla, a security officer, sang songs over a bullhorn to calm people as he led them down to safety. He saved hundreds, and died doing it. The passengers of Flight 93, ordinary people, chose to fight back. Their bravery likely saved thousands. And there were countless others, nurses, janitors, strangers on the street, who helped in ways small and big. In 2011, 10 years after the attacks, the 9/11 Memorial opened at Ground Zero. 2 large square fountains now sit where the towers once stood. Names of the victims are carved into the stone. Water flows silently. It's peaceful. Sad. Beautiful. Every year, on September 11th, a bell rings at 8:46 a.m., then again at 9:03, 9:37, and 10:03, marking the times each plane hit. 2 beams of blue light shine into the sky at night, reaching up, like spirits rising. 9/11 changed the world, but it also reminded us of things we should never forget. Life is fragile. Time is precious. Evil exists, but so does good. Strangers can become heroes. We are stronger when we stand together. People across the world learned these lessons in their own way. The pain was deep, but the response was powerful. September 11, 2001, was the day America cried. It cried for the innocent. It cried for the brave. It cried for the world that would never be the same. But in those tears, there was courage. In the rubble, there was hope. In the silence, there was unity. The buildings fell, but America did not. The people stood up. They rebuilt. They remembered. Even the darkest day cannot steal our light. Anonymous 9/11 survivor. This story is not just about planes and buildings. It is about people. Real people, like you and me. Their stories remind us that every moment counts. That hate can destroy, but love can rebuild. That even in ashes, flowers can bloom. So let us remember 9/11 not just with sadness, but with purpose. To live kindly. To help one another. To never forget.